so much for having me. My name is Julie Leidel, and I live in Evergreen, Colorado. So I'm up in the mountains, on the Rocky Mountains in America, and just kind of fell in love with nature up here. And that's why we have a little 2-acre plot where we can kind of see the Continental Divide and the Rocky Mountains in the distance. So I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. I would say one of the most important parts of the artwork that I create, the essence of what I want to do, is to create a space of connectivity. I fell in love with the natural beauty of Colorado. And so I wanted to connect not only with the natural beauty that's here, but also to connect soul to soul, soul to natural beauty and soul to each other. And so that's really kind of the essence of why I do what I do. I really kind of look at my artwork as an opportunity to create almost a visual and living journal. I do write quite a bit. I'm an author in private. I journal a lot. And so what's kind of fun about the artwork that I create is it gives me an opportunity to incorporate some of my prose and poem into a visual statement. And a lot of times I'll quote other artists or other poets as well, but there are definitely a few pieces that really inspire me. And so I kind of have duality between my artwork, where I have one grouping of art, and I'll show you some examples here, kind of like this one back here, the Telluride painting, that is really my Colorado arts and crafts style. I fell in love with the American art movement kind of in the 1930s and 40s, which was the Works Progress administrations. They wanted to get artists back to work after the Great Depression. So the WPA era really put together an amazing accountability of bringing art back, bringing creativity back through a very hard time in American history, and putting artists back to work. And so these beautiful commissions came for all the national parks. And so there were lithographs and stereographs of these amazingly, very graphical paintings and posters of the national parks to kind of bring awareness, get people back out visiting the country. And so I fell in love with that look and feel. So part of my work really has that same sort of focus and inspiration. The way I create my artwork is quite different. I end up using, they're all hand painted. And so I have an example here of the Colorado series, and I have one unframed because it's a little easier to show on the screen. And everything's looking slightly more blue than it really is in real life, but just to give you an idea here. So the paint that I use is called gouache. And gouache, it's been around since the 1600s. And what I love about it is a quick dry paint. It is fragile, and so it really needs to be matted and put behind glass for the originals. But as you can see, it's very thin. I'm working on a cold press illustration board, and it accepts water media really well. And then I end up using extremely small brushes to kind of puzzle piece the artwork together. And I find that I hold my breath when I paint the typography, just so I can get the line that much straighter. So with this style, what I end up doing is I work from photos that I take. So I'll be out in nature, I'll be collaging a few together. Sometimes it's a single image, other times I'm, kind of creating the essence of a place. So I've captured, photos of like the flowers in the foreground first. And then I'm kind of creating a collage of, so to speak, of the artwork. And so at that point, what I do is I transfer my design onto my cold press illustration board, and I kind of give myself a rough idea of the shapes that I'd like to create. Where this one focuses a lot more on, I would say, the architecture. I'll show you one that's all framed up that focuses a little bit more on nature. And so this is the Mount Bierstadt, which is a 14,000 foot peak here, actually pretty close to where I live. And then there's lots of little shapes in this, and I'll bring it a little closer so you can see. But the shapes are really kind of the story I want to tell. The reason I fell in love with this more painterly experience for my artwork was I feel like there's this great duality between, in life, we need to look at the small pieces, the one little shape, that one little thing that we need to do well, versus also being able to step back and see the 50,000 foot view of something that with only just tiny small shape, line, and color can then turn into a larger picture. And so it's kind of a metaphor for how I try to go between the duality of the details of life, kind of getting stuck in those things, and then trying to pull back and be the observer to see what is it that I'm trying to create in its entirety. So a lot of my artwork kind of speaks to that duplicity. And so as I'm creating the Colorado series, it really is these tiny little shapes that I'm painting. And so the painting is actually really just one layer thick. And the reason I like gouache is because it's thicker. It's got a higher chalk content than your average watercolor. It is related to the watercolor family, but because of that chalk finish, it has this matte feel. So there's no luster or shine to the paint. And I really fell in love with the way, just that overall look of the paint. So that's really why I chose that one for the Colorado series. And I paint not just Colorado, I do a lot of commission work. So I will end up painting, you know, any place that's near and dear to someone's heart, whether it's a perfect memory or the place, you know, that they got married. I've heard the most amazing stories of connection, and that's truly why I create what I do. When I have an outdoor show, for instance, and people come into my booth and talk to me about just anything under the sun, that is my favorite part of being a creator. I even hear stories of triumph and, you know, how they climbed that first 14,000 foot peak and they got to be up in the sky and to see the earth from a different perspective, to heartbreaking stories of losing family members and, you know, taking a trip and saying, this is exactly where I want to bury my father or my mother. Just the most amazing ways to open up. And sometimes art can speak to us on all different levels. It can bring out every single emotion, from the happy and the giddy to the serious and the hardship. And especially with the year that we have all been through, I think year and a half, 2 years here, that there's just room for more connection. I think a lot of things have divided people across the nation and across the world. And I just want to be part of a movement that says, let's bring people back together. Let's bring a connection. So one of the main reasons that I have kind of landed on the styles that I've created, which is the Colorado series here, and then more of the Art Nouveau and arts and crafts style, is my love of art history. And the biggest part of my love for art history, my favorite movement, let's say, is definitely the arts and crafts movement from about 1880 to 1920. And so the arts and crafts movement really just embodied artisans from all over the world, especially in Europe, and then moved on to America, to have this amazing idea that everything that you have, put effort into that, right? Like having decorative art, having beautiful silverware and plates, and just being able to kind of fight against the idea of only the elite rich being able to afford fine things. And so the arts and crafts movement was definitely a social movement, but it was also speaking to saying that everyone should be able to enjoy the simple things in life, and everything you have around you, let that be beautiful and let that have meaning. And so I think it was just a beautiful way to look at how art can affect society, how art can affect culture. And so I'm part of a group known as the Roycrofters. I'll show you this here. I am a Roycroft artisan, and this is a plaque, an emblem that I am able to display proudly. I have been a Roycroft artisan for 5 years, and just this year they have elevated me to master artisan. And so really what that means is there's about 70 of us around the nation in America that are working in this style. And so this mark here is called the Roycroft Renaissance Mark, where the original Roycrofters were in East Aurora, New York. And Albert Hubbard was the founder. He was this fantastic visionary. He was a wonderful artisan himself. He loved book, he loved creativity. And so he put together a campus in New York that's still around today. But in 1903, he actually created, I believe it was 1903, it might've been 1904. He created this fantastic artisan guild where he wanted artisans of all different mediums to come together and to create. So there were a beautiful collection of woodworkers, of metalsmiths, of book artists and designers, and just had a beautiful plethora of community to come and to be able to enjoy this space. And so the Roycrofters, the original mark was that same orb with a single R, created furniture and lighting for hotels and corporations and just large organizations all across the East Coast at the turn of the last century in the early 1900s. And so they had this opportunity to work together to light and to furnish entire hotels and entire buildings. And so they just had this vision that one artist can do great things, but as a group of artisans, a movement can be created. And so that was really kind of a beautiful take on the arts and crafts movement in general, is that kind of more of the guilds and things were forming. And so in East Aurora, New York, that was a wonderful guild. And so it kind of fell in disrepair around the Depression. The campus was sold off and buildings went to different owners. And in the 1970s, a group of artisans that were living in upstate New York decided that it could not be. They needed to bring back the history, to preserve the history of this amazing time and era in art history in our recent eras. And so they slowly but surely put the campus back together. They bought a lot of the different buildings. And so the Roycroft Corporation now owns quite a few of the buildings. There are 7 different buildings on campus. There's a print shop and a chapel and all these amazing buildings, the powerhouse that are now being renovated. And a lot of artisans that are working today have art in the copper shop, which is just this phenomenal little space. And what I fell in love with about Roycroft was the idea of happiness and trying to get something done right now, like the food we put in our body or what we weren't going to watch on TV or whatever makes us happy in the moment. And then there's the idea that's hedonic happiness. And then there's the eudaimonic happiness of what are you working for towards mastery in your life? Is there something like that garden you're tending, or, you know, the idea of lifelong mastery? And so I feel like the Roycroft really ties in of saying, we want to keep increasing our skill level. We are never done with our journey of learning. And so a lot of these artisans are not saying, hey, I'm at the top of my game. It's the exact opposite. It is, if I can, exactly like what William Morris would say, if I can, si je puis. If I can, I want to create and I want to learn from those artists around me. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the guild nature, is that we all want to embody and empower each other, learn from each other, continue the excellence and growth. And so that is something that is so beautiful to me. And I'm so thrilled to be part of that organization. So yeah, in 2016, I joined the Roycroft, and then this past year, they have elevated me to a master artisan, which just means that instead of every year, I have to put artwork in for jury. Now it's every 5 years. It's never a lifelong, you get to use this mark, the double R mark. It's a beautiful organization to be a part of, and I feel really honored that they like what I do too. So I'm actually serving on the Roycrofters at Large board now too, which is quite fun. So let me share with you a little bit about the arts and crafts work that I do as well. A lot of my frames are all quarter sawn white oak. And so this is an example of the quarter sawn where it's mortise and tenon joinery. I work with a couple of different framers around the nation, and they are masters themselves. And it's wonderful to be able to collaborate with other artists. So that's definitely something that brings me a lot of joy as well. And this one is a painting that I did a few years back, and I couldn't find the right quote. So this is an example of my poetry and my art kind of coming together. So this is what I wrote. Effort is not measured by what you get for it, but by what you become because of it. And I feel like this definitely ties to the center of who I am as an artist, that I'm always looking to improve my craft. I'm always looking to connect with other people, but to also bring something that hopefully will bring joy to someone else as well. So there's a message of positivity in a lot of the work that I create too. And maybe what I could do is show you, I have a couple of examples of how I start in some of the process of what I create. So for my Art Nouveau and Arts and Crafts series, I also fell in love with a lot of the ceramic art tile from the turn of the century. And I wanted to be an artist in every medium. I would love to be a stained glass artist. I would love to be a ceramicist. I've landed on painting. And so what's great about that is, instead of trying my hand at all these different mediums, I'm trying to push my medium as far as I can. So where the Colorado series was more gouache, a lot of the Arts and Crafts and Art Nouveau series, like the Swan across here, is acrylic. and I work on panel. So I'm using like a masonite board. And then, for instance, on this one, I am laying down a molding compound. So I'm able to, it's a sandable surface. So I'm able to kind of put something on the surface, sand this down to a flat space after I've gessoed and prepared my surface. And then I'm able to put down this thinner line. I'll bring that a little closer. A thinner line down because I wanted to create a place, a reservoir, so to speak, for my artwork. And so within this, I then will come back in after it's dry. It's a wonderful dance. I find that I end up putting some of it out, pushing the line down so it sticks, so I can also get a variety of line thickness. And then I'm able to really enjoy this piece once it's dry. I'm able to then take my sanding block and come in and just kind of really rub and sand that surface. So I have kind of a nice line weight in both high relief and then on the back of the surface. And then from there, sometimes I'm going to leave these lines white, and I have some examples that I can show you. Or I'm also going to sometimes come in with a copper tone, and then I'm going to be able to add some of my acrylics then later. And what I love about this is there's something that's so tactile too. So with my gouache series, you can't touch it. You're going to get your oils on there. It's going to get shiny in spots, and you just can't. You've got to only look. And so that side of me is fulfilled in the visual art. This side of me is fulfilled because not only can you see it, you can touch it, you can get up close to it. And I really enjoy being able to have art that can be both avenues. The other thing that I'm really been excited about is not only are these kind of my two main mediums between acrylic and gouache, I'm also painting with enamel. And I figured, why not paint with enamel on actual stained glass? Boy, that's a big reflection. Let's go this way. There we go. So this is a stained glass panel, and I'm actually using enamel paints for the tree trunk and for the hillside. And I apologize, I don't feel like it's showing up good enough. And then I'm using gemstones for my leaves. So those are garnet and amethyst. I'll use turquoise and a variety of different gemstones. But I think this gets back to the idea of that tactileness and also wanting to push my medium farther than maybe it originally would go. So I find a way to create different textures of the arts and crafts movement. I feel that it has really seeped into the foundation of who I am and why I like to create. And so when I look back at history of all the different arts and crafts textures between metal and wood and mica and tile, and a plethora of others, I really enjoy the idea of trying to kind of recreate and continue on in that style. And I think that the arts and crafts movement is still very much alive and well. I would call myself a revivalist artist, but through the Roycroft, which is a world, it's a small pocket, but it is known around the world, the Roycrofters from history. We are still continuing in that. And I think there's just something amazing. I feel very blessed to be an artist that's alive and knows what art movement I'm a part of. I think a lot of times in the past, you know, all these artisans would get together, and then as decades would pass, then you would see that movement in its entirety. And I feel really blessed to say, you know, I know where I fit. I know that if I had a time machine and I could go back to the early turn of the century, that I would definitely sit in some cafes and chat with a lot of these artists and hopefully become friends with them. So it's nice to kind of be able to say thank you to the artisans that have come before and to kind of continue on in that style. So I used to think I was born in the wrong century, but I know I'm born in the right time. I'm just really excited to continue with some of these amazing artists had started and to be a part of that same movement.
I wanted to ask you, when you're creating, are you taking pictures? Do you go on site?
A lot of my artwork definitely comes from my lens. I take photos of a lot of the places that I paint. And I really think that there's just so much to be captured. I am not much of a plein air artist due to the paints that I use. If I was painting in oil, I think it would be wonderful to be out in nature and creating. But unfortunately, both acrylic and especially gouache dry so fast. And for whatever reason, gouache attracts some gnats that are around. They like to fly into the paint and give it a little texture. So I don't paint a lot outside, but I do hike and I love being outdoors in nature. I live up in the mountains, and so I'm trying to kind of always infuse myself with nature around me. So definitely I take a lot of photos. And what's great about that is that I will take so many photos that I can kind of really puzzle piece it together. I was a graphic designer for 20 years before my fine art career, and that's where my love of typography came in as well. I really find that it's great to be able to pull from quite a few different photos and get the lighting and kind of really play with the composition. And then at that point, what I do is I'll be able to take those photos, I bring them in online. I use the computer as a form of my layout. And so I will definitely do some designing on the computer as well. I look at digital art and computer as just another tool. It's just like a palette knife or a brush. My mouse and my Wacom tablet are just another tool that I use for creating. And so I've got the fine art work that you've seen here, but I also am a digital artist as well. And I work with different organizations to create, sometimes either fine art or digital art for their needs. So I really try to find and work with corporations and foundations to give them something that they can give back to their donors, something that can connect to their memory or their activities, like say at a summer camp. And so it's really fun to be able to give back and give something that is visually in memory.
You are doing both landscapes and urban art. Urbanscapes. Can we talk about them, please?
Absolutely. So I have found that no matter what we do, as we inhabit this beautiful earth, we are always at an interface between nature and what's man-made. And so there's times when we want to forget about everything that's man-made and be able to just focus on the creation of what these beautiful trees and the mountains and be able to focus on that. But I feel like there's a really beautiful space between finding artisans and architects that are out there with these beautiful buildings also. So a lot of my work, like for instance, I paint a lot of the Colorado universities. And so I'm usually always very interested in some of the earliest and oldest buildings on campus. And so in each one of those, I'm usually incorporating and showcasing that original building that was there, and to just showcase the brick and the stonework of buildings that are, in America, some of our buildings are only 100 years old. And I know in Europe and all across the world, we've got a lot more history when it comes to the architecture. So our history is newer, but I still feel like it tells a story of connection, of saying, look at how we can connect not only with what we see in nature, but how we can then also emulate and create these buildings. And so I really do enjoy playing with the urban side of artwork as well, because I think so many of the buildings, especially, throughout the world, but in Colorado, as I paint those with more, more of my focus is there, I found that there is just a lot of beauty within the architecture that has stood the test of time, that has not gotten torn down yet. And I really want to honor that as well.
Your paintings also have different sizes. Some of them are quite large, while others are smaller.
I would say that I have experimented with the sizing quite a bit. I have not locked myself into one size, and I don't think I ever will. I have painted some that are quite large, that are 4 foot by 8 foot for commissions in homes across the Rocky Mountains. And sometimes there's just something so wonderful about working so big that it's larger than my table in my studio, to where you can really immerse yourself within that painting. With loving the arts and crafts movement, a lot of the homes from the bungalows were very small. They didn't have large spaces or large walls that were just, ready for a ginormous painting. And so a lot of my work for the arts and crafts movement tends to be smaller, things that are more cozy and quaint, and things that will fit that perfect little nook. And to me, I feel like every single house has a variety of wall space. And so what I have found through selling my artwork is that apparently I really love options, because what I love to do is create not only artwork that hopefully someone will connect with, but then once I have this painting, I usually have about 6 different sizes, and I have them in at least 4 different styles. So I have my artwork on canvas, on metal, on wood, and on paper as matted prints. And so I feel like that affords a bit of an atmosphere to where we can kind of co-create. So if I have a client come in and say, okay, I know that this is the painting that I'm looking for, at that point, we can really change the size and the style to what's going to fit their space. Because truly, I believe that art it has to fit, it has to fit that person's home. And so I really love the idea of having all these options, because I feel like over the decade or so that I've been out doing art shows, I feel like I have seen every size and shape sell, because all of us have our unique identity. And I think being able to give some of that power back to the buyer, to the observer, to say, okay, I know I love this. How do I envision it in my space? It gives them an opportunity to also be the creator. And so I really like that duality there. I think it's a lot of fun. And I feel like a lot of my artwork, through the messaging, for instance, I love some of Gandhi's words, be the change you wish to see in the world. And so I really wanted to kind of incorporate this Art Nouveau feel, but also give just a positivity around the idea, and give a visual to the idea that we can happiness can land on us and light on us just as simply as a butterfly could. Or one of my other messages that has really, I think, kind of probably reached most of us is, may the struggles ahead bow to the resilience within. And I think that there's something to that, where, especially through collectively what the world has gone through with this pandemic, we have to try to find that inner strength and find that voice to say, all right, I'm going to be able to keep going. No matter what wind comes my way, I'm going to keep growing. Between some of the messaging, I just always want people at any economic level to also appreciate and be able to take art home with them. And that's why I don't want to just have huge, large, really expensive paintings. I feel like that is wonderful, and I enjoy those clients extremely, but I don't want that to be my only clientele. I really want not only for that co-creation to happen, I want it to be, I can afford a $35 print. It doesn't have to be the original that's, $4,800. So I feel like between having the different sizes and the variety of options, and also having different price points, I feel like if somebody really is drawn to my art, they're going to find something that they like and that they can find that fits their budget as well. And so that's actually a really important part of my philosophy.
How do you select your inspirational quote?
That is a great question. I call it the flow. There are times in my life where I've always kind of been a night owl. As I've become a mom of two, my kids are 12 and 9. I have, sometimes you just don't get that opportunity to get all the artwork in and all the creation you need to do during the day. So sometimes I will stay up late and paint. And I'm 46 now. And so as I've been in my 40s, I realized that, pulling the all-nighter means something extremely different than it did in my 30s or my 20s. And so I need to really honor my sleep as well. But what I find is I get in these places every once in a while, where I call it the flow, where I will wake up and I'll have ideas for paintings. And so I have a journal next to my bed, and sometimes I can just write down an inspiration and I can go back to sleep. And other times my body just says, sorry, you're up and you need to start working on this. So it's interesting, because I really do rely on my intuition quite a bit when it comes to my artwork. There's definitely times when, for instance, this piece here, the beauty you see in me is a reflection of you. And that's a quote by Rumi. This came out of a conversation with my mom during the pandemic and during the George Floyd time, where we were really looking, and we should be continuing to look at the differences between inequities in our culture. And so this came out of a beautiful conversation with my mom, where she was like, it doesn't matter black or white or male or female or gay or straight or any other duality that we can look at, or young or old. We can find the beauty in each other. And so the inspiration came from a beautiful conversation with my mom, where she's like, I wish people could just see how beautiful everyone is, rather than focus on the differences in negative light. Can't we look at the beauty of other people? And so, she was talking about maybe putting in a swan. And so there was a bit of a heart with the way the necks go. And I realized too, with a dear friend of mine, when she saw this painting, she saw something completely different, where she saw the idea of comparison and how the imposter syndrome, where we continually sometimes can compare ourselves to others and find that we're lacking. And instead, if we see beauty in someone else, realize that is a reflection of us. We're seeing that beauty because there is something in them that either we aspire to, that we want to empower ourselves more in that direction. And so every person is an example of what to move towards or maybe what to move away from slightly. And I just feel like there is something there. So a lot of the inspiration kind of comes in the middle of the night, through conversations, through the flow. I also have a larger library of inspirational books from the past. So I really do enjoy looking at artists like, Muka and Tiffany and Gali, and just really enjoy, and Lautrec, and I mean, a million. I really enjoy looking at what other artists have created before, just as a point of inspiration, not as a point of copying, but definitely as a point of inspiration. It depends. I feel like there's that side that where I find the inspiration that just kind of comes naturally to me. And then I will spend quite a bit of time researching. So for instance, I have a painting of a phoenix, and I have a painting of a raven, and I have a painting of my peacock, to where, the raven really talks about the Norse mythology. And you have these two ravens named Memory and Thought, and how Odin would send them out into the world, and they would report back and talk about the voyage that they were on. And I thought it was really intriguing that he would name these two ravens such an internal name as Memory and Thought. And it really gave me the idea of saying, how does this portray, how does it work to not only have a way we externally talk to people, we be truthful, we're kind. Are we internally, are we kind to ourselves? Are we truthful to ourselves? And so a lot of the artwork kind of spawns from that. And then also, I would say a lot of the artwork will come from people that I talk to. So for instance, for my Colorado series, I'm talking to people and they're like, gosh, have you thought about painting this mountain? Or have you thought about painting this town? And so I really like to listen to people. And I feel like a lot of times they'll help me see and observe things that I might not see on my own, gaps in my collection and that sort of thing. So a lot of times it's things that kind of, I feel the inspiration just kind of light on me. And then a lot of times it's also, where does there seem to be a need? What am I missing? Where is there an opportunity? And so I know that I will never run out of subject matter. And I know that to my core, and that to me is probably the best gift I could get as an artist, because in my early years, with a lot of my early work, I was always worried about, well, I know I want to paint, but what? And at some point when I found kind of my niche and what I want to create, that problem went away. And I'm forever grateful for that, because I feel like there's so many artists out there that love to create. And my advice to them would be just create whatever it is, even if you don't feel like you have a cohesive style yet, just create and it will find you. If you put work into it, whatever it is, like whatever struggles we have, the ones that we push past are our biggest achievements. And so I feel like creativity, it can be a delicate thing, but I have come to a place to trust that creativity is going to be there and that flow will be there. And when I, don't have maybe a big inspiration for a painting like that, I always know I can go back to a picture of something that inspires me. And so it's really nice to be able to have that duality. And I really do feel like I use different parts of my brain, my personality, between my two different collections of Colorado versus the arts and crafts work. And I do switch between the two of them because I feel like they both rejuvenate and renew me a little bit.
Before
so for instance, I really fell in love with Chaucer. And so it says, the life so short, the craft so long to learn. And I just fell in love with that quote. And so, this one was definitely more of a piece that I feel like sometimes I create just to put things in my studio that help me find that modality of creation. Let's see, I also have the body, mind, and spirit. And I really wanted to create a piece that kind of spoke to an inner journey for me. I am a new practitioner of Qigong, which is a standing meditation, and it's the grandmother of Tai Chi. And it's within the Chinese medicine and Chinese culture. And it's a daily practice. And so this painting actually happened before I started Qigong, but I could tell that this was kind of a love of mine. And so I'm happy to have incorporated it. And I wanted to just show one woman in kind of three different phases of her life. I wanted to focus on the body, the mind, and the spirit, because I think there is a trinity there. And I wanted the border to feel very weighted and rooted down here into the earth with a strong foundation, because I feel like that's an important part of any human experience. But at the top, I wanted there to be a thin line between heaven and earth. And I wanted there to be that essence and idea that spirit and inspiration is not far out of reach, that it is this very thin crust on earth, this tiny little layer of a mile or less of breathable air, and how life is here, and how there is just something extra out there that is, life is so contained in this space. So I just wanted there to be a little bit more of an esoteric feel for some of this. The other one I thought I'd show you was my phoenix. And my phoenix, I'll bring it a little closer so you can kind of see some of the details. For this one, I think each of us has a way of recreating ourselves, right? And so for the phoenix, I wanted to research the earliest history of where did the phoenix come from. It was definitely the Egyptian culture. The great heron, it is noted that that's probably the inspiration for the phoenix bird itself, rather than a hawk or some of these other kind of newer ideas. So I wanted mine to be based on the great heron, this long neck, very delicate bird. And this is the hieroglyphic for fire. And then down the side, the hieroglyphics are a mirror image on both sides, but it says wake, becomes, rise. And I wanted to just create something that would also inspire that no matter what, we all fall down, we just have to get up again. And instead of flames with my bird, I wanted the tail feathers to be a ribbon of consciousness between the birds, to where we could, take the good and leave the bad. So that's definitely part of the inspiration there. And a lot of my fonts, I try to research different antique fonts. And so, for instance, with this one, this is probably a newer font, but a lot of times I do a lot of work to kind of create that font and create it almost in a way of like a logo, to where I feel like typography, and I think that's why I'm also tied to, I love Egyptian hieroglyphics, is because there's just so much art and beauty within the words themselves. And I think each letter of our languages can have such beauty to them as well. So that's why I really do see text and typography as something that can stretch and breach that idea of fine art. I think for many years, and I still experiencing this actually. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you would be a fine artist if you didn't include text or typography on your work. And I just see it from a different perspective. I think that that text can be the most beautiful art. And so there's absolutely no problem in the way that I look at things to say that, yes, text and typography can be part of fine art. So I just challenged that viewpoint a little bit on that.
Before we look at your power presentation, I just have a question. Do you also
No,
do
I
calendars?
haven't yet. I was trying to figure out if that was something that I would like to do, and I really would. I absolutely think that there is an opportunity for a calendar. So it might be one where I do one that has more of the arts and crafts artwork that is like already existing. And if I were to do, I might also work on some that have nature in each of the seasons. And so that might be something that I would kind of look through my collection and say, okay, do I want to do one maybe for Colorado specifically that has each of the different seasons as you go through. So yeah, that's absolutely something that I would consider doing for sure. Wonderful. So just a little bit about some of my early work. This is from my graphic design years. I would create a lot of different logos, and I work on user interface design. And so this is some of my very early work, kind of in my early 20s out of school. Oops. And then this was definitely some of my early paintings when I really didn't know what I wanted to create. I knew I liked color, and I knew I liked a graphical sense. In college, I went to Colorado State University, and I was definitely always, my painting teachers were like, you're not painterly enough. You don't have enough, gradation, and it doesn't feel cooked in enough. And you have this style that's, just very illustrative. And I've always been drawn to an illustrative style. And so as you can see in some of my early work where the subject matter is absolutely all over the place, it's just something that I knew I liked the lines and the shapes and hard edge. And let's just see here. I was going to skip down a bit. This was a picture of the library that I have here, and just part of the library of just kind of some of the collection of works that I love. And so the inspiration definitely of the arts and crafts movement and of William Morris and John Ruskin. And just really, I fell in love with the whole arts and crafts movement. Margaret MacDonald is a huge inspiration for me. I absolutely love her work, Charles Rennie Mackintosh and the Glasgow School of Art. And then, as you can see, a lot of my inspiration is not just tied to fine art, it's definitely to decorative art. I love, silver work and metal work and jewelry. Alphonse Mucha. I love a lot of the jewelry that came around from the turn of the century as well. And then this is some of the early work of the Roycrofters. And I really there's something to be said about spending the time to create something with purpose. Gustav Stickley in America was one of the main forefront and forefathers of the arts and crafts era here, as well as Louis Comfort Tiffany. And then like Paul Revere and some of the Saturday Evening Girls, they made these beautiful pots. And so these women were working together in a guild atmosphere as well. And then one of my other favorites is Alan Tupper True. He is a muralist that did a lot of work in the West. So there are probably dozens of murals around Colorado that have his influence. And then so to show what my inspiration is between, on the top here, this is kind of the inspiration I had from the past, and then my paintings are below. So sometimes I'll fall in love with a font from something, and I will recreate that font and try to imagine what it would look like. I love the Green and Green brothers that created a lot of beautiful homes in Pasadena, California. And so I'll take inspiration from there. The leather work from the arts and crafts, absolutely. I love Frank Lloyd Wright and some stained glass, and a lot of the printed publications from the time. These are all a nod directly to the craftsman and to Frank Lloyd Wright. This is a John Ruskin quote here. The pottery for sure as well, absolutely. There's just something so gorgeous about this, the ceramics and the metal work. And so then some of my inspiration from that work. Albert Hubbard, who started the Roycroft, had some amazing quotes along with Dard Hunter. And what's great is that I know, and he's a colleague of mine, Dard Hunter III, which is his great-great-grandson, is still working in this style. So there's legacy, there's story between artisans that have come before and the legacy that they pass down to the next generation. And just a few more pieces of showing kind of, William Morris Red House, where he has this beautiful quote up there, ars longa vita brevis. And the art is long, the life is short. And so just to know that he's got these mottos in his house, that's something that I kind of do myself. And I try to pull from the mottos of that era to say, just remember that this place that we live, it's precious. And it's a short time that we're here. This is M.H. Bailey Scott in the Blackwell House in England. C.J. Puy, this is one of William Morris's favorite mottos and sayings. And so this is some of the inspiration that I would kind of take from those artisans from before. Let's see with this. I love Archibald Knox and Marblehead pottery and Rookwood pottery. And this is the raven I was talking about. And then for my Colorado series, here's an example of some of the, the inspiration, whether it be, the WPA era national parks, whether it be vintage postcards or photographs that I take. This is definitely how I kind of create my series. So these are just some photos that I then have based the artwork on below. And, sometimes it's photos, like I didn't have a drone. I worked with the Civic Center Conservancy to get some of these photos. Other times, people on campus are looking at me funny because I'm standing up against the building trying to get the dome to break the surface of the horizon. And someone's like, what is that crazy lady doing with her camera? So a lot of these are single shot compositions that have been inspirational for the painting. And then I also add a lot of artistic license. So for instance, I might take out a lot of apartment complexes, or I might physically change the composition to where it's going to fit a portrait orientation, where I wanted to create that mountain, but I wanted it to feel large the way it does when you're there in person. Where this picture just doesn't capture the enormity of some of the mountains around Durango and have the town feel smaller. So I wanted to be able to create that space with artistic license. And sometimes I'll do multiple photos as my collage, where here, this is a single shot. You can see very much inspiration from that photo. And then other ones where I'm going to take, a photo of the mountains in the in the distance, and then I'm going to have a photo that's separate from the flowers, like the asters here, or the Indian paintbrush, or some of the other wildflowers we have to create that space. For my Fort Collins one, there's this place called Horsetooth Reservoir, and actually the rock formation looks like horse's teeth, and so it's this beautiful kind of inspirational point in Fort Collins, but you can't see it from the downtown area. So it's really capturing the essence of a place. Again, more of the multiple photo collage to where, the mountains are back there and they're enormous when you get there, but you can barely see them from town. So I wanted to enlarge them so it feels the way you are experiencing a place. And a lot of times I will work from photos that are, horizontal in orientation, and I want to create that into more of a poster look, more of that portrait orientation. And so sometimes I'll add foreground for that, or I will just extend the painting or crop in on it. And just a couple other pictures of, my inspirational photos first, and then what came from there. And so here is a little look. This is actually quite a while ago. It's kind of an older picture of my studio, but I have the first floor of my home in Evergreen, which is my studio space. And then it's wonderful to have a lot of space within my home I feel really grateful to have this space where I can just come right downstairs, whether it be in the middle of the night or, during the day when I should be working. And then this is an example of some of that tile series, and then what it looks like once I've added my paint to it. This was a painting that I had done for the arts and crafts conferences that are held annually. And so just kind of the idea of my inspiration, some of my process, and the finished piece. And a lot of times I will use the computer, but I'll also use I'll draw on my designs. Sometimes I'll use a light table if I'm looking to have a mirror image, which is what I did with some of these. This is the enamel on stained glass. Here's an example of one of my paintings that I did for the 4 elements, where I have a painting in progress, where this looks very different than some of the other ones, where you can really truly see that I'm painting each and every shape individually, instead of kind of adding a wash or, building up painting by layer. And here's another example of, a really large painting that I created of Breckenridge. And then some of the details, you can see the size brush that I'm using. They're really itty bitty. And then I have quite a few of my gouache paints here. I end up almost never using any color straight out of the tube. I enjoy mixing color, and so there's a lot of that happens. So that's really a big part of the tradition and the creation process. And I thought I'd take you through one of the paintings that I had done from beginning to end with my raven, putting down my ground and my primer, coming through with a sponge and painting on a gradation of color. Once that's dried, coming back in and washing it out a little, adding some reeds and some color. Then kind of trying to add mist in the foreground. So once that's dry, adding more and more layers of atmosphere. And then I'm actually sketching on my design. And it really depends on how I go. You can see I kind of decided to do all the text and typography first. I must have been feeling in a very steady hand at this point. Sometimes, if I haven't eaten or I haven't had some water in a while, I'll get a little bit jittery. And so it's funny. I can kind of say, all right, I've lost myself in the zone. I need to get back to eating and drinking food again. And then through this process, just kind of adding my acrylic, adding up and building up the layers, and then adding a metallic to the wings. And then this is enamel. Again, you can kind of see the 3-dimensionality of that paint there. And then I am very lucky. My father, who is pictured here, this is his hand, created a lot of my frames for me. And so we actually built a brand for the corner decoration for the frames. And then my husband, pictured here, he actually creates a lot of my frames, and he took a little workshop from my dad and learned how to make some of the frames. And this is many, many moons ago. My children are quite little. But I just really fell in love with the idea of being able to not only have an opportunity to, you know, create, but to be able to involve my family any way they want to be involved. My daughter and my son are both highly creative. And I think it's great because I just have the studio where they can come in and they are of an age to where they can do their own projects. We can work on projects together. But I just love fostering kind of a creative spirit here in the house. Yes, I'm excited. I actually, it's funny. I think in past years, I've done 25, 26 shows in a year. And through COVID, I think I had an opportunity to press the pause button, say, okay, what do I want to do? And so how am I best serving myself? Am I overextending? And my decision was undoubtedly, yes, I was overextending. And so this year for 2021, I only did 11 outdoor shows. And so my outdoor show season has ended. Earlier this month was my last one. And then I have a series of shows that are, you know, just little gallery spaces, exhibitions. And then I have my artwork in some different shows for like the holiday season. And I'm excited to kind of carve out this opportunity to create again, because when I'm doing my show season, there's not a lot of creation that's happening. And now I can kind of step back and say, okay, I'm ready to get back to the creation. So I do a show out in Asheville, North Carolina. It's for the National Arts and Crafts Conference, to where all the a lot of the Roycrofters come, and just fantastic artisans from all over are going to come that are interested not only in the arts and crafts history, but also they're interested in the artisans that are working today in the style. So it's an annual conference. It's kind of the biggest conference that we have in America. And so I will be doing that show in February, which I'm really excited about. And I do some smaller talks, like I have a talk coming up soon that will be with a local community. It's called just a meet and greet, kind of a morning inspiration. And then I'm really excited. I'm going to be part of the Pasadena Heritage show, which runs from November 5th through the 17th. And it's a virtual show, so people can join from anywhere. It's on my website. You can also join and buy tickets. And I'm going to be doing a talk about a virtual tour of my studio and a little bit more in-depth process and photos of what I do and how I create what I do, and the inspiration behind it. But I've just kind of fallen in love with the idea of carving out not only a space for art, but just a space to be an entrepreneur. And you have to wear so many different hats when you create, between selling and marketing and, you know, fulfillment and shipping and all these things that I think it's a nice way to balance my life to where I feel like I can play in all these different playgrounds, and I enjoy that. At this point, I realize I'm at a space where I really need to hire some help and to kind of have more than just me as a team member. So that's hopefully the next steps as as the year progresses.
Do you show your art in galleries as well?
I do. I have my artwork in a few galleries and in public spaces. I've worked with the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and they have what's called the Mesa Lab in Boulder, Colorado. And so they have my painting of, we call it NCAR, lovingly with the acronym. That's in on permanent display. And I have done a lot of work for different organizations and foundations as well. So different camps, the Outdoor Lab Foundation I've been working with. I'm very excited. That's a local community where they're bringing kids into nature for part of education and part of the K through 12 experience. And a lot of different shops, I think, not just with an arts and crafts focus, but a lot of different retail shops. If it's the right fit, I would love to be able to put my artwork in there. So I have a list on my website of, you know, I don't even know exactly what the number is now, but there's a handful of shops that carry my artwork as well. And I'm excited to be in conversation with other museums and other galleries moving forward too.
How can people find you besides your website?
Absolutely. I am on Facebook. If you look up the Bungalow Craft and Julie Leidel, those keywords should pop up on both Instagram and on Pinterest and on Facebook as well. We can get so tied down in the details of life and just get so wrapped up in the stresses of life. And I actually had a pretty profound experience about 6 or 7 years ago where I was in such a place of stress that I threw my back out and I could hardly move. And I had really injured myself, and it was 100% stress induced. And as I'm in Costa Rica, in a country I don't know, and having a friend that luckily can speak Spanish that takes me through the jungle to help me get a shot for my back because I was in so much pain. I was seeing purple and I was about to pass out. I realized that I was doing things a little wrong and that I didn't have the focus in the right spot. And so I think that's a really important question, because I think that no matter what we do, we have to make sure we're fundamentally taking care of ourselves. I just have to put it on the priority plate. I used to tell myself that I want to be successful at business, and that's my main priority when I look at like a career. And then what I realized is my focus is the wrong spot. I want longevity. I want to be here. I want to be 100, and I want to be painting. And so when I changed my focus from, you know, can I put my artwork, can I get it to other people? Is there a way to connect with them? To when I said, can I connect with myself first? I feel like I now have more to offer other people, because I'm really truly trying to focus on fulfilling and just filling up my own cup. And then I think anytime we can do that as mothers, you know, as partners, we have this opportunity to give more to other people. And so that's really been my focus. And it's been my focus, I think, since I threw my back out, but I've been able to refine that through the years. And I have to say that as hard as these last couple of years have been with COVID, it's really changed my perspective. And I feel like I got a chance to hit this pause button that I really desperately needed to. I was about 50 pounds overweight. I was eating foods that were not good for me. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I wasn't, you know, there was all these things, all these places and deficiencies that I wasn't really nurturing myself. And I am proud to say that I have really been focusing on those things. And by only literally being able to say, I can't do a single art show because nothing's happening in the world, I needed that time, and I should have taken it before, but I'm happy that I had an opportunity to reassess and reevaluate. And so I just think that shift in priorities really helped me. So I had some building blocks to move forward on. And I don't know if I would have gotten to there on my own. I think it might have been later in my life, and I think I would have lost a decade or more of not having my priorities in the right spot. So I'm actually pretty grateful for just having the opportunity to keep my world small, to keep a focus on my family and on myself, to just try to be the best human I could be so that I would have more to offer other people. And, you know, I think as a mother, that's a big philosophy of mine, is just to be able to say, I want to have endless, boundless energy the way my kids do. And I want to be able to reflect that back to them. So I feel like even though my focus in losing weight wasn't necessarily to find a higher level or a higher connection to creativity, it's absolutely been a byproduct of this last 2 years.